This is Vlogmas, the Merry Christmas edition. It's Christmas. So let me first of all begin by wishing you a happy and blessed and Merry Christmas. Pray that you feel God's favor shining down upon you, that God's light is warming you within and without, and that this Christmas season is all that God has in store for you. Of course, being Christmas Day, this is actually the beginning of the Christmas season. I know that we tend to think of it as that time leading up to Christmas, but that's Advent. That's period in the Christian calendar, at least. That is Advent. And Advent is that time that we spend preparing, remembering, anticipating, and expecting what God has in store, what God has done, remembering with grateful reverence and joyous celebration Christ coming into the world, prayerful recognition that Christ still dwells among us. The Word was made flesh and dwells among us. And then finally, anticipating, waiting in expectation and anticipation that Christ will come again. Whatever that looks like, whatever that means. And it may not be in the way in which we expect, but that's part of what anticipating is. It is being open to the possibilities, and we talked about that yesterday. So I won't belabor that, but I will say that on this final Vlogmas edition, that I want to go back to the topic of God with us, which seems most appropriate to share on Christmas Day. You know, we think about God being born, clothing God's self in humanity, and all of what that means of breathing air and having being thirsty, drinking water, and being hungry, having to eat food to survive, having to go to sleep to get rest, all the things that God would not need to do. But God enters into the human condition. So God is not only present with us, but God enters into the reality of our lives so that there's a even deeper level of empathy that God is able to have. God suffered. God felt bad sometimes. God got tired and hungry and thirsty and irritated. The things that we experience, the emotions that we experience, and not that God needed to enter into human form in order to experience those emotions, but to know what it is to be within the limits and the blessings of a human body and human form, and all that means. God enters into that. And you think about God enthroned in heaven, not needing to do any of that, but doing that in order to reconcile us back to God's self. And that's the only reason. You know, God did not need to do this. And we know as we go down further in the story, there was a time when Jesus said, praying to the Father, Lord, if it is your will, Father, if it's your will, take this cup from me. Because there were parts of the human condition that were just too painful to bear. And there were parts of that journey to reconciliation and restoration for humanity that cost Jesus so much that even Jesus knows what it is to have a desire not to perform God's will. Now, Jesus being God and being the perfect exemplar of humanity, of course, says, not my will, your will. Surrendering, the willingness to surrender his will to not only the will of the Father, but God's plans and purposes for humanity. And so as I think about God being with us in that way, it's a source of comfort when we are in those situations where God is calling us to do or to be a certain way or to do a certain thing, to enter into places where we don't want to go. There's a certain comfort in knowing that even in this, Jesus has walked this road before me and of course walks with me, but walks with me with an understanding of what it really is costing me. I read a book and I really regret that I don't remember what book I read this in, or the author, the title. If I think of it or come across it, I'll put it in the comments below later. But I, I read this book and it was talking about the incarnation, about Christ coming into the world in human form, the Word made flesh. And it was talking about that, contrasting it, Jesus' birth, contrasting that with his passion, his crucifixion. And saying the reality was that it was all a humiliation for the divine, for God. To take on human flesh was a humiliation, a deep and profound humbling of all that God is and um, all the power and might and just um, the, the 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 setting aside of of Christ's divinity in order to be cloaked in humanity. Not that he lost it, but that he actually willingly set it aside. For us, he gave that part of himself, he put part of himself to the side. Not my will, but yours be done. And I think about that, the passage in John, as in just a few hours we'll have our Christmas Eve service. And I'll be saying the words from John 1. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. And we have seen his glory, glory of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. We have seen the glory that comes from this deep and profound humbling that Jesus does in becoming flesh, being the living word, the ultimate revelation of who God is, and what it means then for us to be formed, crafted, created, molded in the image of God. And that doesn't mean that we all bear the same physical features. It actually means we bear the same spiritual features. That deeply within our DNA, we have been created and crafted to do the things that God has done as he showed us in his humanity. Doesn't mean we're divine. It means that Jesus, if we think of Jesus as the second Adam, as the redo of the first man, Adam just meaning man, human being, Jesus comes as that perfect example, the prototype, if you will, of humanity. And so when we walk with him and we enter into the life that he created, as he invites us to enter into his space, know that he enters into ours, and there's this deep, profound joining. And that's what Emmanuel is. God with us is not just God coming down. It's not just us reaching for God. It is coming together, being with one another. So as we continue in the Christmas season, the days after Christmas, after the presents are unwrapped and the services have been completed and the food has been consumed, the celebrations have gently eased down, let's reflect on what it means and recommit ourselves to being with Jesus in this journey, in this life. another part of John 1, a little bit earlier in the passage. In him was life, and the life was the light of all people. My prayer for you today and for all time for you is that the light of Christ will shine in you, for you, and through you, now and all the days of your life. Be blessed in the Lord, rejoice in God's goodness, and live in the grace and truth and light of Christ. Be blessed.